This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me.
My name is Eli Wald, and I first started going to Camp Tavor in 1996. I was in Chotrim at the time, and I went for about a decade, and I was a madrich for a number of summers. And probably my second summer as a madrich, I became very interested in the history of Tavor, both the land itself, the property use, the acquisition of the land. When I was working with what we ended up calling Chog archaeology, one of the things that we did was we went to the archives in Three Rivers and the township archives and the county archives. We basically tried to go to as many places as we could to determine whether or not we could locate a lot of the deeds and the leases and the documents that detailed the owners of the property who ended up purchasing the property over time, census records, etc. The farthest back we were able to go was 1858, when we saw that it was owned by the Drescher family. We saw that by the mid-1890s, it was owned by C.S. and Marie Engel. And an interesting, notable fact is that Marie Engel was a fairly acclaimed opera singer at the time. She was traveling throughout Europe, she was a notable soprano, and she was building quite a career for herself as an opera singer. So to think that she was an opera singer and her family ran something called Angleside Resort, heard this interesting connection. We don't know exactly when the Engels sold it to the Reifman family, but Hyman Reifman sold the property to the Coopers in 1917. To Abe Cooper, who then sold it to Jacob Cooper, who had acquired the money. They had taken out a loan from the Jewish Agricultural Society, which compelled them to move from Chicago to this property, this 70-acre property in Michigan, to start a farm. It served as a farm, and there were crops, and there was pasture and grazing land. There was an active orchard, and at some point in time they transformed that into something that they called Cooper's Angleside Resort, which became a Jewish resort for families from Detroit and Chicago, Jewish families that wanted to come up either for the weekend or for a week-long period of time with their families in the summer. So they operated that for a number of years with a lot of the same structures that a lot of us grew up with at Tavor. The Chadar Ochel, the Bayit obviously was there. It's fascinating. We were able to acquire all of these old photos, and it's amazing to see these automobiles from the 1920s and 30s sitting there in front of the Bayit on the key car. I think that the history of the land itself is very important, because I think that for those of us who have a connection to the camp and think that it's a special place and a magical place, this wasn't something that was a blank slate that was built from scratch. The land that really had this tremendous legacy for so many years, for centuries in fact. I grew up, as did many people, hearing these incredible stories and rumors and anecdotes that Camp Tavor had been a stop on the Underground Railroad. So we started this research in 2004 in a real attempt to try and determine whether or not this was a stop on the Underground Railroad. And one of the first things that we did was speak to the mayor of the town. And he always believed that it was true, that there weren't really a lot of documents accessible to us at the time to determine whether or not this was in fact the case and whether or not it had been a stop on the Underground Railroad. So a lot of it had been hearsay. I came across this article in October 2005 in the New York Times, and it showed that there had been a discovery in a town not too far away called Vandalia, Michigan, that researchers from Western Michigan University had determined that this was in fact a stop on the Underground Railroad. And they determined that in a variety of townships in the general vicinity, there had been other stops. And I remember going into Google Maps just to determine exactly how far apart they were. And it was generally understood that stops were 16 miles apart, that people would travel for a day, they would stop overnight, and they would travel again the next day. And the distance was on average 16 miles apart. And I remember typing in Vandalia, Michigan into Google Maps as the origin point and the destination as Three Rivers. And I remember this unbelievable moment seeing that they were exactly 16 miles apart, which I think didn't definitively prove that Tavor was a stop on the Underground Railroad, but I think helped provide an important puzzle piece that geographically this could be the case, that people who were traveling from Vandalia on this already established route could have stopped at Tavor and sheltered in the Bayit for a night or two on their path to freedom. So when Habonim was looking for a property for a camp in the Midwest, they were initially in a few different places. In 1948, Habonim actually purchased a property in Waupaca, Wisconsin, 120 acres. In the early 1950s, they started searching for a new property that was more suitable.
We just found a place that I liked particularly, and they finally all agreed with me that this was a good place. And so we settled on this little area near a small town in central Michigan. I had to go around and collect money, otherwise we wouldn't be able to open. I went to Abonim headquarters, camp headquarters actually, and they gave me a list of available people who would be able to run a camp.
There were certain things that had to happen in order to obviously transform it into to an active campsite. And it's interesting, you read through some of the legal documents and the contracts, there were a number of stipulations, things that they had to do. So they had to maintain all of the fences, they had to maintain all of the structures, they had to ensure that they were properly heated in the winter so that the pipes wouldn't freeze. And over time, the camp had to tear down certain structures in order to accommodate.
Well, a couple of them we had to destroy to make room for a couple of campsites for kids. I remember the orchard very well, and I remember having cried when they tore it down.
And I'm going back to Splendor Bridge, try to call it home.
There were a lot of really interesting structures that used to exist, and in fact, even when I was a chanich at camp, a lot of them still did.
There were a number of tzrifim sort of on the chof area.
That there were a series of cabins that existed along the chof, so families could stay in a variety of accommodations when they visited for either the weekend or the week.
The old Moadon Cambet, located in front of the Hadrocha, was torn down in the mid-90s to make way for a new Malachat Yad. However, then that Malachat Yad was put next to the Hadrocha at the site of the old Moadon Machaneh. The new Moadon Machaneh, at the base of the Caretaker's Hill, was built in the late 70s, early 80s. The Refet, which was an old foundation of a barn located between the road and the Toran, was also bulldozed and buried in place.
The Refet used to be this foundation of an old barn where they would have dancing and play gaga.
The old Amelin Shrif is actually one of the oldest structures. It was a chicken coop that was used for a very long time. It's one of the original structures that was part of the property, probably the second built after the Bayit. Chadar Ochel was the original dining hall of Cooper's Resort, which was then later expanded by Tavor in order to accommodate the growing number of campers that were there. So the apple orchard, as far as we can tell, because we found a lot of apple trees, is if you go into the Bonim Shatach, between Bonim and Chotrim, a lot of those are actually old apple trees. So it's thought that if at some period in time somebody were to cultivate them and weed a lot of the forest out, you could potentially grow apples again.
They built the pool when I was a camper. The last year that I was a camper, or Madrid or something, there was a pool. Before that, we only used the lake, and before that, when the lake was going away, they built a swimming hole in the lake, which was kind of a strange thing. Near the Ulam, there's a small tzrif. At one point it was called the Milwaukee tzrif.
And behind me is our Chadar Musica, or Chumu, as I think the kids call it today.
The boathouse, that's also a really old building. Originally, it was a boathouse. That was its original incarnation. When it was Cooper's Resort, it was the boathouse.
The lake, as far as we can tell from the pictures, looks pretty similar. Obviously, there are issues with the water levels year after year, and we've been able to tell from documentation that those were issues that they faced even back then. The levels of the lake, which I think at the time were a little more pressing too, because they affected irrigation and the ability of those who were growing the crops and who were dealing with the cows to be able to make sure that the land was dealt with in a sustainable manner.
I think the Kikar, no matter what we do with the Kikar, the principle of the Kikar, the center of camp, that remains the same.
So the Bayit's there. It is this sort of central part, the big Kikar with all the trees in front.
This is a key to the Bayit. As far as we can tell, it's from the late 1800s. And I remember when we found this in the forest and we took it to the Bayit and we actually put it in the locks, and it still functions.
And throughout it all, the key thing about Tavor was not facilities, it was really the people. It's an amazing place for kids and Shabbat to come and learn a lot and be themselves and grow.
Things don't stay the same, and they can't, and they shouldn't. And you tear something down and you build something else up. The important thing is that it keeps going.
When we think about Tavor, we have a very special connection to the physical place itself, to the land itself, whether through the memories that we created or through this sort of very esoteric or ineffable characteristic or qualities that exist about the property. But when you start to unravel the legacy and the history of what the property served as and what purposes it served over generations and centuries, whether it's building community or bringing people together or promoting tolerance or promoting equality racial equality, economic equality, social justice, that this is a piece of land and this was a property that from the beginning of its existence has been used for very similar purposes and very similar reasons.
I really like the area of the Kikar out in front of the bayit. It's a very wonderful place to be. I like that part of camp really nicely.
Love being in the Harochel when the kids are standing on the benches and singing.
The tree bench in the Bonim Shetach. I just remember finally hitting Bonim and being so excited and feeling so cool that I wasn't in Chotrim anymore, and just the thrill of being able to stay up late and hanging out on that tree bench where we spent every single night.
The basketball court. From spending all my time there when I was in Chotrim, to running both Chug basketball and Anaf basketball when I was a Madrich, to every Friday night after Rikudei Am playing my heart out, it was a truly special place for me.
The Chof. In particular, if you can get into the water before the docks have been put in, or at the end of the summer when they've already been pulled out, if you wade out about waist deep and just let the water still around you for a second, it's magic. It is just spectacular.
The Giva and the Moadon, especially on Erev Shabbat, when the whole camp, dressed in white, would go up to the top of the Giva and usher in the Sabbath Queen. And then we would dance the night away in the Moadon, doing Israeli dancing.
Standing at the back of the amphitheater when Midrash is happening and just observing everybody.
My favorite place in Machane is the Mirpeset of the Charochel. When I was a baby, my family was up at Machane because my dad was the director, and we came back in 1986 when I was a Chanicha, and I remember walking around and thinking, I don't know this place, I've seen it in pictures, but then we walked up to the Charochel and I was hit with the smell of wet, sort of rotting wood, and it was a visceral reaction, and I said, I know this place, I remember this. And it was my earliest memory, is the smell of the Mirpeset of the Charochel.
My favorite place at Tavor is the path between Chotrim Shetach and Bonim Shetach, because I'm all about the woman's journey.
Sometimes in our life, we all feel pain, we all feel sorrow. 1978, Camp Tavor, Midurah.
Friday night, in the Bonim showers, when we would put a big piece of wood over the door and back it up with towels and garbage bags and cover the drain of the showers with a garbage bag. And then you could turn on the showers and you could fill up the shower space to like about 3 feet high of water. And we would hang out in there and listen to the police Yada Madada that had just come out that year and have a great Shabbat.
One of my favorite things about Tavor, my favorite places actually, isn't even a place. It's a good rain. When I hear the thunder and kind of experience the hard driving rain and the color and the smell, it just brings me back to running up to Chotrim to put down the flaps.
Our favorite place is the Refet for Rikudei Am and Gaga.
My favorite place in Machane is
my favorite spot at camp is the Hof, the swinging bench on the Kikar. On the Kikar when you're lying down looking up.
The Ashpa pit, and it's a miracle that we never backed the truck, Moshiach, into that pit.
My favorite place was the lake and canoeing.
And my favorite place at camp is the first few Ohel platforms in the Bogrim Madat Shetach, because when you're laying in bed, you can see the lake from your bed.
On the basketball court during Rikudei Am on a Friday night, probably during Yesh.
I have a better one.
What's that?
In the Mikarer, the old Mikarer, when it was so hot and you had to go in for the passion punch kibbutz, and you would like stay in there for 15 minutes.
It felt so good.
Drinking the meats, and then you'd come up with like, oh, here it is.
I love to be up at camp really early in the morning before everyone wakes up, and I like to walk on the paved path from the bayit to the Chadar. It's like calm and peaceful. You can take time to survey the Chof notice the trees, hear just like quiet, creaky noises of everything starting to wake up. And while it's really calm, you can feel that a lot's going to be happening that day all around. And I just like that feeling of that calm, but also the excitement.
I do remember that I loved being on Shabbat Hill on Erev Shabbat. I loved it because it didn't matter how old or young you were, or how long you'd been at Tavor, or what you did there. Everybody's masks, so to speak, kind of came off, and everybody's spirit really emerged. For a person like me, who can be slightly ungrounded, that felt like walking on solid ground. And that was deep. And I miss that.
I would say Shabbat Hill for Shabbat, and then going down to the Chadar Ochel and everyone being together, and the Shabbat dinner, and dancing, and that was probably my favorite times at camp.
The swing bench on the key car, especially right before Shabbat, it's the most relaxing time and place to watch camp and to just kind of reflect on things that happened during the week.
Right after Shabbat, on the key car, after we've all walked in circles and done the brachot, and we lay down by the chof and just relax, and listen to music and just be with our thoughts. It was an incredibly reflective part of my week. And of course you always hope that, that guy you had a crush on might be nearby when everyone got to relax by the chof.
The treehouse in what was the Bonim Shetach, which we would go up there, like the Schwagers, Berlins, Dems, name it. We were up there writing letters, playing blackjack for stationery. It's like a really big game up there. And sneaking and writing poems and stuff all over the wood. And then my other was at the kitchen sink doing pots.
Yeah,
right?
that's fun.
Because every time you do it with somebody fun, you end up talking and chatting and like getting soaked and spraying each other. And even though no one ever wants to do it, it actually is really fun. So when next time they ask who likes chocolate ice cream, put your hand up.
Don't volunteer.
The top of the camp road. There's really nothing like the feeling of turning down that road and knowing that there is going to be untold adventure. There are going to be beautiful friendships. There are going to be endless possibilities. That's what the road represents to me. There's really nothing like it anywhere.
I like Camp Tavor because we have lots of fun and everybody shares everything.
You get to meet lots of people and you get real close to everybody. You make lots of friends.
Everybody should come to camp because you get to stay for 4 weeks and it's really fun. I like Camp Tavor because everyone's really friendly and it's like a big family.
It's the greatest place on earth.
Three Rivers, Michigan, USA is a camp where the goats and the children play. Chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool and all shooting, all b-ball. Oops, it's in the pool. But wait, let me start at the top of the morning when we roll out of bed and head down to the Torian. That means flagpole. It's where we all meet and start the day. But first we eat.
Oh, look who's coming. It's the swell guys. They're so strong. They were nice before, but now they're macho too.